Welcome to RAF Davidstow Moor. It operated as a coastal command airfield between 1942 and 1945. Their job was to protect the Allied naval forces from enemy U-boats and aerial attacks. In case you didn't know, there was a little bit of a war going on at the time, although it must be said this airfield was one of the lesser used airfields. It certainly played a vital role in the war effort. By the end of the war, the airfield closed fairly quickly and the larger buildings, such as the hangars, were removed. With many airfields sat around the country unused, a lot of them were turning into racetracks. It made sense after all. You've got the perfect area of land with half of the work already done for you. Silverstone, Snetterton and Castle Combe are just a few of many that started life as an old World War II airfield, and RAF Davidstow Moor also lived on to be a racetrack. Davidstow Race Circuit sits about 1,000 feet above sea level, meaning it was renowned for poor weather conditions. You'd get thick fog and torrential rain, and it would appear today is no exception. The circuit's also not far from Brown Willie Giggity, which is Bodmin Moor's highest point. Today, you could be forgiven for thinking that there's no way any racing happens here. And you'd be right. It was in fact from 1952 to 1955 that races were conducted here with the Cornwall MRC Formula One series. Yes indeed, Formula One races right here in the middle of nowhere in Cornwall. Now I feel I should point out that these were a series of non-championship races, however officially still counted as Formula One events. I should also point out that despite being Formula One races, nobody actually entered any Formula One cars. Most settled for the less spectacular 2-litre Formula 2 car, except that is for Leslie Marr. In 1955, at the final race event here at Davidstow, he entered his Formula 1 car. Perhaps predictably, he piloted his Connaught 2.5-litre Formula 1 car to victory, pretty much smashing the competition along the way. He recorded a new lap record of 1 minute 14 seconds with an average speed of around 90 miles an hour. It also brought Connaught Automotive their first Formula 1 win, and by coincidence, the previous year in 1954, the small car company Lotus also saw their first Formula 1 win here at Davidstow. Racing was short-lived at Davidstow. Whilst the events held were fantastic races in their own right, the location and the facilities were certainly suboptimal. It was rare to see more than 6 or 7 cars lined up on the grid, presumably because nobody wanted to travel all this way to use a toilet that was effectively a hole in the ground. The track layout was initially fairly simple, consisting of 3 corners and being 2.6 miles long. However, in 1952 and onwards, they changed the layout of the track, shortening it to 1.9 miles and adding in some chicanes. A grand total of 44 races were held at the Davidstow Race Circuit, the majority of those being smaller club events and only 3 being official Formula One races. So, unlike many of the other airfield come racetracks, unfortunately Davidstow was never able to progress into anything more, and racing ceased in 1955. So what remains today? Well, there's the odd building left over from the airfield days, although mostly they're bare shells with very few features to look at. If you're into your urban exploring or World War II history, then certainly it may be worth a trip. It would appear that the control tower is the best place to get a view of the track. On a clear day, you'd be able to see right the way to the other end of the track, although I imagine that was probably a rare occasion. You'll have to use your imagination here, guys, but this is the area where the pit lanes would have been at the time of the race circuit. There is nothing here now other than sheep and fields. Most of the taxiways and runways are still in place, and despite the poor surfaces, it would appear that you're able to drive round. So I think, since we're here, it would be a great idea to see if we can do a lap of the 1952 to 1955 circuit. Casually walking towards the camera off to the car. I'm going to make my way from the pit lane now to the start-finish line. It's really misty and foggy today, but if you can see my car, it is already on the grid, in pole position, naturally. It's a Saab. Right, welcome to the car. I am sat poised on the start-finish line, ready to see if we can do a lap. The surface is absolutely terrible, so it's going to be slow, but I shall speed up some of the footage and it will be seamless. Right, racers ready in 3, 2, 1, go! First off, we head down the main straight and eventually we'll come to the Davidstow chicane. However, this road surface. However, before we get to the Davidstow chicane, we're going to have to cross one of the now open public roads. Of course, back then, that wouldn't have been an issue and you would have just carried on straight down, but I'll see you there for that. As you may see, ladies and gentlemen, this is where the road crosses what would have been the main straight. So, you are reversing. Just bear with me whilst I try. You'll see this on camera, hopefully, because this looks harmless. I bet it's massive and I get stuck. Oh, look. Don't do this, ladies and gentlemen, it's dangerous. Now, unfortunately, just because of the way things are today, it's going to be difficult to follow the exact route of the Davidstow chicanes, but if we use our imagination, this would be our first chicane, and then you'd actually head back around to the right, sort of more over to where we were. I'm afraid I can't do that just because of the way everything is laid out. The surfaces are much better on this side. And as we get to the end here, whilst you would have been faffing around with some chicanes, you then come into the Melbourne hairpin, which is, as the name suggests, oh, this surface is no good. So we've come out of the Melbourne hairpin and are now heading up the back straight. I'm just going to negotiate the road. Can't see, just going for it. I am not perhaps following the most perfect of race lines today, it must be said. I'm not sure how the original race circuit would have been set up, but I imagine it would have been a right turn here to head into the pit lane. We're carrying on still down the back straight, which actually is not that straight, it has a few turns in it. I don't know if you can see to the right there. I'm hoping that that's someone's dog. Otherwise there's wild wolves here. Right, so we've just blatted down the back straight and are coming up to Alton Corner, which is actually named after one of the local towns. Again, I can't take the perfect racing line, but I'll do my best. Just past the old control tower there. And here we are. Alton Corner, Alton Corner, which doing at 80-90 miles an hour back then would have been fantastic. It's now just a short straight down to South Corner, where we'll be making a right turn back onto the main straight and obviously back to the start-finish line. Yes, racing driver, out of the way, Seagull. And this would be a sprint to the finish and across the line.
Till next time, take care of yourself and each other.
Fraser has left the building.